But broadly, what we needed at the very high level, at the household level, at the individual level, is whether we are furthering that household's ability to become more sustainable. Because the more sustainable they become as a household, the more stable the financing becomes easier. And sustainability to a great extent is how is not enough. We need to look deliberately at the borrowers and ask ourselves, what more? And for us, what more has been de-risking and capacity building. To a great extent, most of our finance is combined either with financial and entrepreneurship training, making the borrower better in paying their debt and in managing finance and managing their businesses. And to the households, there is a lot of capacitation to do what they do better. We shouldn't assume that finance is a national instinct capability. It's a process of learning. We all went to school to learn the various professions. We should regard the business also as a profession and try to enhance its capacity. So I would really like to recommend that we consider capacitating, de-risking, and empowering. And lastly is the issue of blended finance. One big all kind of finance may not really work in most of the communities, the highly risk environment. You need to partner with others, take long-term risks with short-term, look at credit guarantees, look at risk-sharing guarantees, and such components. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I think that you're a whopping $1 trillion in commitment for global sustainable finance. And one of the challenges of doing this, so if we're going to talk about micro, this is the opposite of, this is as far as you can get from micro, is $1 trillion commitment for investment. So,
agricole. Société demande d'abord trois facteurs. C'est d'abord la terre, l'homme et aussi la technologie. Alors, pour ce qui est de la terre, le Burundi, il est vrai, c'est un petit pays, mais un pays qui est favorable à l'agriculture. C'est très favorable. La chance que le climat est aussi favorable à l'agriculture. Nous avons 3 saisons agricoles. Avant, on avait 2 saisons, mais depuis 2020, quand nous avons entamé ce programme, que chaque bouche doit avoir à manger, on a créé la 3e saison culturelle qui se fait pendant la saison sèche et la production a augmenté dans ce sens. Pour ce qui est de la mobilisation des citoyens, le résultat en 2021, on a eu une grande production de maïs jusqu'à ce que les citoyens commencent à demander au gouvernement de leur montrer le marché parce que c'était très mobilisé. Alors, en 2022, malheureusement, avec la guerre en Ukraine, il y a eu pénurie des engrais. Et on avait même, pour produire ce qui est organique, on a même créé une industrie pour transformer l'engrais chimique en engrais organo-minéral. Mais cette fois-ci, il y a eu carence des engrais et la production semble diminuer. Mais à voir la population burundaise et la superficie du Burundi, c'est étonnant que plus de 90% des denrées alimentaires se produisent à l'intérieur même du pays. Imaginez-vous nourrir un pays de 12 millions qui a une superficie de 27 000 km². Ce n'était pas facile, mais avec cette stratégie, on a pu quand même assurer la sécurité alimentaire pour ces citoyens. Les défis, d'abord, il y a des moments où il y a les changements climatiques et qui occasionnent la sécheresse, mais aussi d'autres défis, c'est les financements pour ce secteur. On a cherché maintenant à faire, pour financer le secteur agricole, il y a un partenariat entre les coopératives agricoles et l'opérateur économique, parce que les coopératives vont donner la main-d'œuvre et l'opérateur économique va amener un capital financier. Ensemble, le gouvernement aussi met à la disposition des terres domaniales pour augmenter effectivement la surface cultivable. C'est un défi important, donc c'est la technologie agricole. C'est la technologie. Aujourd'hui, nous utilisons la roue. Nous nous imaginons quand nous allons exercer la mécanisation agricole, ça doit assurer l'augmentation, mais aussi les recherches sur les semences sélectionnées. Si on parvient à fabriquer nous-mêmes les engrais, tout cela va contribuer à augmenter la production. Mais toujours, on doit subventionner l'agriculture parce que c'est un secteur qui a beaucoup de risques de changement climatique surtout. Et aussi les terrains qui sont accidentés, nous devons les aménager, faire des terrasses radicales, mais aussi chercher à faire l'irrigation. L'eau du Burundi vient des montagnes. C'est facile alors à irriguer, même si ce sont des collines, les collines sont en bas par rapport aux montagnes. Alors si nous voulons augmenter la production pendant toutes les saisons, nous devons, pendant la saison sèche, aussi préparer les procédures d'irrigation dans les collines. Et nous l'avons déjà exercé et nous voyons que ça produit déjà. Donc pour nous, nous voyons que l'agriculture, d'abord, c'est un secteur très important. On ne peut pas travailler quand on n'a pas mangé. Nous sommes tous ici parce qu'on a mangé. Donc, c'est pour cela que nous disons que chaque bouche doit avoir à manger et nous devons mobiliser tout le monde dans ce secteur. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
$44 billion. Where are you going to get with that? Knowing that the population is really growing, we have a youth population that is very young. 77% of the population is age under 35. So the biggest challenge is how you insert this youth within the economy. How do you find jobs to them? And if you don't have the industry, you don't have the added value. Where do you get resources and growth to invest in the social infrastructure that these people need to have a decent life? I'm talking about education, health. If you go only to looking for debt, knowing how high the cost of getting money today is, then you're getting to debt and you don't get out of that. So first thing, we need to have really partners in order to bring technology, in order to bring capital, in order to bring market, so that we can add value to what we're producing and being able to capture that. This is one very important thing that I wanted to mention. I was talking about mango, I was talking about pineapple, and we import pineapple juice when we can really produce it locally. So if you take that away, then you're not that yet. We take an example going for the cocoa. If in the next 10 years, instead of 6%, I can capture 25% of the added value in cocoa, then I'm going to increase my GDP by 75%, knowing that my GDP today is $61 billion. So that gives you just an average of what's going on. Now, coming to the food, since most of the people were producing commodities, they were really not concerned about producing really food, but just for the local consumption. And also 70% of the population was living in the rural area. So they would produce for themselves, to feed themselves, and maybe sell the rest in a local market. Now today, the whole picture has changed. 50% of the population is living in an urban area. So you need to produce high volume, you need to transport, you need to distribute, and that's quite not the same at all. People are using the money they're getting by selling the commodities to buy food. And now you really have to create an environment, an ecosystem that will help you produce volume food, to create an environment where you have the appropriate logistic and transport and distribution system to access people who want to have quality and low-cost food that they can have. Now that goes not only just producing, it goes for research center before you start to produce, then production, then transport and logistics, then distribution. On each of these areas, you have to do something. On the research center, you have to use selected high-yield seeds or product. Otherwise, you're not on the market, you're not going to be competitive. You need to use fertilizer. You need to use water. Can you imagine that in the whole country, less than 10% of production is irrigated, which means we're waiting for the rainfall to get to production. So you cannot produce consistently all year long. You're waiting for the water, you're producing, according to the seasons, so that is a huge issue. So irrigation is the issue. Fertilizer is an issue. Mechanization is the issue. You cannot have the productivity you're looking for if you really plant growing like we used to do 30 or 40 years back in a traditional way. So you really have to transform the production. You also have to transform the transport and logistics, because now if you increase the volume, you need to know how you're going to store that, because most of this food, if you don't sell it in 2 or 3 weeks, then post-harvesting loss is huge. Transport, but you also need to build market. You used to sell it in the traditional market that we do in Africa. You won't get all this production to be sold. So you have to invest in the new distribution system, so that the whole chain is addressed. On the production, the challenge is also that the kids who've been trained, or the people who are actually producing, even if you bring mechanization, you bring fertilizer, you bring irrigation, they have not been trained to be using that. So you need to train them. Just bringing the know-how will not be enough if you don't train them. The infrastructure has been built according to what we were doing before, which means commodities, which means you harvest, you transport to the port, and you ship. Now it's not the same. You really have, as I say, to find storage. You really have to find appropriate distribution system. So this is really the key challenges that we have. So what are our objectives and what ways are we going to solve this issue? On the production system, definitely we need external partners. External partners to bring that knowledge of a high yield seed, mechanization we need, fertilizer we need, help to train people in our research center we need, and that is a very important issue. We also need people to build distribution system. We also need people to build logistics. So all that has to be added to the new technology we're using today. Today, if you're going to produce on a modern way, no one will even understand how you cannot use drone system to span all over fertilizers, so on and so forth. In the distribution system also, you have to use digital to do distribution. People are buying through internet, so on and so forth. So it's a huge challenge at every and single step that we have to really challenge before we can not only satisfy our own demand in the market with this new food security environment, but also to export, because the continent has 60% of the arable land, water all over the places, and within the continent, less than 5% of the agriculture is irrigated. Not to talk about the land that we have available. So you can see the huge potential. But then once again, knowledge, technology transfer, capital transfer, and partnership to help the actual grower to improve their productivity, or to see how we can, through PPPs with partners, develop very big land and irrigated production of food to be not only sold locally but also exported. And that's what we're doing, really focusing on the private sector, because the state, which is really job creation. And I would really conclude there, when you have a continent that in 2050 will be 2.4 billion, having half of this population age less than 20, if you don't start to think about how you put these kids so that they will fit at ease, then you're gonna trouble. You're gonna be in trouble, because they won't stay there looking for you. Now they have a smartphone, through internet, they can see all the city in New York, DC, and they want you to transform your city like that. They don't see why they shouldn't be living like what they see in the internet. So The whole world is changing. We have to move very fast, and we cannot do it alone. We think that if we can really change the picture and make you look Africa, perceive Africa differently than what the media used to show you a couple of years ago. And I think that what is happening today, I think there's a great future for both our countries. Thank you very much.
How do we solve this challenge? And it was agreed that we needed an institution. That has never been more important than today. What we've done, starting from seeds, is trying each time to understand that challenge the continent is dealing with and try to move with that. Today, the biggest challenge is how we build private sector, public-private sector partnerships that can address the threat and the investment gap that is in the agricultural sector and is really holding back the capacity of the sector to deliver change for farmers, to deliver change for our population. So the way we go about this is we understand that businesses are built on trust. We understand that businesses are built on comfort levels. So we work with businesses to help them understand how African countries work, what their priorities are. Heads of state in the morning spent a whole lot of time trying to explain some of the opportunities that are in their sectors on the continent. But what doesn't come through is when we talk to businesses, it's like, oh no, it's not safe. Oh no, it's corrupt. Oh no, all sorts of things. I work across 11 countries in Africa, and we do fund governments. I have not gotten one default case from government with the resources we support governments with. I don't. Does it mean that there are no cases where challenges might be that resources are not accounted for? I have two, and they're private sector related. So the idea of being able to invest in Africa because it's the right investment place is something we need to keep helping private sector understand. There's also the whole idea of what do they invest in? Nobody invests in need. Africa has a lot of need, but nobody's going to invest in that need. Businesses invest in opportunities. So what my institution does is also to understand how we can catalyze those opportunities from the ground. We support local businesses to create an ecosystem that delivers services to farmers. The farmers can uptake seed, that farmers can uptake fertilizers, that farmers can have markets. Only then can businesses come in because there are opportunities that are being created on the ground. We support farmers with an ecosystem of last mile distribution networks, extension, so that they too can be part of what businesses are trying to do. So it's really, really important that in each case we try to connect the dots, bring people together. When a business tells us that they are struggling with the country in terms of we are not being paid or this policy is not working, we consider that our job to help governments understand what businesses are struggling with and how they can make their life better. But it's extremely important that businesses do understand that Africa's economies in the agriculture sector is anchored around smallholder farmers. And so it must be that we give value to farmers as well. We can't do business at the expense of smallholder farmers. So that's something also we try to help businesses understand. And I'm very happy to say that we have John Deere here, but one of the businesses we're trying to do in Africa, we've invested in a small company in Africa that is now creating partnerships across 5 countries, reaching 630,000 farmers, and is looking to reach any farmer that is looking to mechanize.
Sebastian Institute of Technology, or more popularly, Sebastian, and Mr. Brad Smith, the Vice Chair and President of Microsoft.
It's the first time that we have such a big African presidents, US people interacting. That's already a connectivity. So I'll start with my own country. It's a huge country. You must first connect there. We are different ethnic groups, different regions, speaking different languages, and you must start there. Connectivity must start already there too. We also learned a big lesson during the COVID-19. That was a lesson that opened up our minds and hearts to hold hands. It didn't discriminate against a race or a poor person. We are all equally affected. And because of that, there was that connectivity, whether in cities or towns and rural areas. First, you must connect Benduk to Oshakati. That's now in our country. Then before you go to connect the rest of Africa. So connectivity is very important, but there are problems. Poverty. How do you connect poverty with rich people? Even in a UN system, you lift a billion people out from sitting on a table of Security Council. These are all connectivity misses. That you live out people, you live out in the country itself, some sections of people, not connecting them, and then in Africa, we are also not connecting. So connectivity with cyber, what we are talking about is new thing, digital strategy, must take the background of those who are left behind. Don't leave them further to run away for those who are now well placed, that they have access to everything, digital gadgets and so on. However, you cannot stand still. We must run to catch up those of us who are left behind, and also connect Africa. Africa is huge, but African trade, since that we just established that we want to now have Africa to trade with itself. Africa to develop itself and invite others to come and join us to help us to develop Africa. But first thing is division, poor and rich. How do you connect them? In the country itself, in Africa and the world. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hear you say access, access, access to the rural, to the unconnected, to the underserved. And I think that is a key aspect of what we face. I would like to turn to the private sector.
Bonsoir à vous au studio. Eh bien, ce qu'il faut déjà dire de prime abord, c'est que ce sommet a été convié dans l'optique de revoir, d'améliorer du moins ce partenariat qui existe aujourd'hui entre l'Afrique et les États-Unis. Il s'agit de travailler sur une meilleure reconfiguration des relations qui lient les États africains et les États-Unis. Et vous le savez, ceci fait suite à la présence accrue aujourd'hui sur le continent de la Russie, mais aussi de la Chine. Alors, il est question pour les États-Unis de faire une sorte de reconquête du continent africain pour revoir et justement sur plusieurs points. On parle de l'aspect sécuritaire, l'aspect économique, le développement. De toutes les façons, plusieurs forums ou alors conférences sont organisées dans ce sens, conférences dans lesquelles d'ailleurs participent plusieurs dirigeants africains pour partager leur expérience avec d'autres membres du gouvernement américain. Nous avons déjà pu apercevoir quelques dirigeants africains qui prennent part à ce sommet. On nous parle d'une cinquantaine de chefs d'État quand même présents dans le cadre de ce sommet États-Unis-Afrique. Alors déjà pour la journée d'hier, ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que notre équipe, l'équipe de For You Media est arrivée en fin de journée. Nous avons quand même pu essayer d'avoir, parce qu'il y a tout un dispositif non seulement sécuritaire, mais aussi en ce qui concerne les médias. Nous avons pu avoir nos accréditations, mais aussi passer par des compromis du moins impératif sanitaire en parlant de tests Covid. Ce qu'on peut dire pour la journée d'hier, ce qu'on a vu, c'est qu'il y avait eu aussi d'autres forums qui ont été organisés, mais plus axés cette fois-ci sur la sécurité. Et à cet effet, le secrétaire d'État américain à la Défense est revenu sur un point, sur la présence une fois de plus de la Chine et de la Russie sur le continent africain. Et selon lui, d'ailleurs, cette présence pourrait avoir un effet déstabilisateur à l'avenir. De toutes les façons, cela s'est fait autour d'une table entre certains chefs d'État, certains représentants du gouvernement américain qui ont essayé de discuter, sans oublier également que pour l'occasion, puisqu'on parlait de sécurité, les questions telles que la sécurité ou alors les conflits dans les pays tels que la République démocratique du Congo ou encore l'Éthiopie, ces questions sont revenues sur la table des discussions. D'ailleurs, tout à l'heure, nous avons justement aperçu le Premier ministre éthiopien Abiy Ahmed avec sa délégation qui prend part activement à ce sommet. Alors, pour cette deuxième journée consacrée cette fois-ci à l'économie, il y a encore, comme on le dit, plusieurs forums qui ont été organisés. Ce que nous avons constaté, c'est que les premiers jours dans le cadre de ce sommet ont été consacrés à différents forums sur différentes thématiques. Et bien aujourd'hui, on parle d'économie, on parle de business entre les opérateurs économiques et bien sûr pour essayer de voir comment on pourrait développer les États africains, comment est-ce que les États-Unis et les États africains pourraient accroître leur partenariat sur le plan économique. C'est donc l'objet ou encore l'objectif principal en cette deuxième journée. Eh bien, nous avons assisté à ce forum, mais on a encore aperçu une fois de plus d'autres chefs d'État. D'ailleurs, le président centrafricain, Faustin Archange-Touadéra, y a pris part. Le président angolais, lui également. Le président Macky Sall du Sénégal également a pris part. Il a partagé son expertise ou alors son expérience, l'expérience de son pays dans le domaine. Le président Mbalo également est présent dans de la Guinée-Bissau. Le Premier ministre de Côte d'Ivoire, le Premier ministre Patrick Archi, aussi a pris part à ce forum, à cette discussion. Le président du Burundi, Évariste Ndayishimiye, il a d'ailleurs été appelé à partager son expérience parce qu'on le sait, le Burundi aujourd'hui est un pays qui maximise, qui met l'accent sur l'agriculture dans le cadre du développement de son économie et c'est un aspect qui semble très bien marcher de ce côté-là. Alors il a pris la parole devant ce parterre d'invités pour partager son expérience en ce qui concerne justement le développement économique peut-être à travers l'agriculture. Donc voilà, c'était une journée aujourd'hui, comme on peut le dire, axée sur l'économie. Nous avons déjà marqué une pause, mais ce qu'on peut aussi dire, c'est que tout à l'heure, lorsqu'on quittait la salle, on nous annonçait la présence, un discours du président américain lui-même, Joe Biden, qui va prendre la parole une fois de plus devant certainement ses homologues, mais aussi les invités qui sont présents dans le cadre de ce sommet. Ici, Sikendoumbé fait comme chancelin pour For You Media en direct de Washington DC. Merci. On vous revient pour plus d'amples informations et bien sûr actualités autour de ce sommet.